What's going on, people, and welcome to today's video where we're just going to take a quick peek at some of the stuff that was added in the latest Deepwoken update because, well, man am I happy about it. I don't really have any plans to be covering Deepwoken updates as they come out, considering the fact that, as I've stated in the past, I think that the weekly update schedule for Deepwoken has a tendency of doing more harm than good, which in of itself could be its own video, but there's not really a point of making that video because I have it on good authority from the developers themselves that for a huge variety of reasons there's no plans to do away with the weekly update schedule. But if you want the extremely brief version of that potential video, I think the game would benefit a lot from taking a little bit more time and having more substantial content updates that had people that actually got excited to jump back into the game, as right now, people who finish up the content that's there hop off, and if they come back in 3 weeks, you can barely even tell that anything's changed at all, which, yeah, that's not super fantastic. That being said, I made a video last week talking about Deepwoken's Layer 2, and I talked about a huge variety of different problems that Layer 2 had, and to my absolute astonishment, like 2 days after that video came out, and some of that stuff was addressed. What? Say hello to the Worm Warder Lantern, as well as the Delver Boots. These are two items that you can craft in Layer 2 that will make your exploration considerably easier, and offset some of the things that people got frustrated about in Layer 2, especially the boots. Because trust me, guys, I saw all of your comments talking about the fact that I didn't talk about the wind, and that's mostly because, well, I've never had any of the bugs that you guys are talking about with the wind. Not saying they don't exist, I'm sure they do, and, well, here's your solution. I didn't even need to talk about it. The devs heard you. Really quick, if you're looking to get either of these items for yourself, I'll just quickly go over how to get them because neither of them are rocket science. For the lantern, you'll get the recipe to craft this item when you activate any of the lanterns in Layer 2. The recipe at current is 2 Gale Wax, 4 Erythene, and 4 Spark Glands. For the Erythene, there's a huge variety of different places that you can get this stuff. My recommendation is underneath Ducaricia's Manor. There's a boatload of Erythene here, so it's super easy to get. In terms of the Spark Glands, once again, extremely easy to get. Just kill a bunch of jellyfish in Layer 1 of the depths and you'll have this done in no time. I should note that the recipe, I believe, is bugged right now. It says a Spark Gland, but it takes 4 to craft it, so just know that when you're getting started. And finally, Gale Wax. For those who may not know, Gale Wax is a substance that spawns in set locations in Layer 2, and you can't take these out of Layer 2, which means that if you want to craft either of these items, the Delver Boots also need Gale Wax, you're going to need to do it in Layer 2. Just for the sake of the fact that you're going to need 4 Gale Wax total if you want to craft both of these in one run, I'll show off where you can find the Gale Wax. It's very, very easy. The first one is literally right out the gate from when you get to the first windy area. The second one is in this little corner right before the Bone Keeper. The third is right here after the Bone Keeper when you go to turn on the generator. And finally, your fourth is right outside the Ignition Union base. You basically get 4 Gale Wax for free because you need to do all of this stuff to get into the Ignition Union base anyway, and the only crafting bench in the entirety of Layer 2 is here in the Ignition Union base. Now back on track, the Worm Warder Lantern is extremely simple in how it works. You equip it, it currently resides on your pendant slot, and while it's equipped, it has the upside of basically completely neutralizing parasites. They can't get you anymore. It does have a minor downside of slightly slowing you down. I'll note that this is definitely noticeable while you're playing, but when it actually comes down to a gameplay impact, it's not going to make any sort of meaningful difference in any of the areas of Layer 2. For the sake of experimentation, I went through the Bounder area with it on and didn't have any problems getting through. And any parkour jumps that I otherwise normally would have had to make, I could still make just fine with the lantern equipped. Now that's the lantern. What about the Delver Boots? You get this recipe when you talk to Alpha for the first time in the Ignition Union base itself. So in other words, at the same time as when you get the Union Hook. It should be noted that just like every other recipe in the game, as long as you know what you need to make, you don't need the recipe for it. In my case, my game bugged out and I never got the recipe because, well, I don't know, but I was still able to craft it just fine. Now, in order to get the Delver Boots, you need to have a pair of leather boots, 2 Gale Wax, and 2 Umbrite. The leather boots themselves are pretty easy to get. They spawn in any random chest on Lower Aricia, so if you're there trying to get Erythine anyway, you might as well farm some chests and get some leather boots. Umbrite, there's not too many options in terms of where you want to get it. It can be dropped by the Immortal Guardians on Minitirsa, it can be dropped by the Mud Skippers that are in the mines in the Songseeker Wilds, or if you want to get a little bit risky, in Layer 1, the Shadowcast Trainer has a bunch of Umbrite nodes surrounding him, so if you can get in there, you can get the Umbrite you need for this no problem. Taking the leather boots, 2 Gale Wax, and 2 Umbrite and combining them will get you the Delver boots. Now, as I said earlier, the Delver boots will make it so that way the wind doesn't knock you off the cliff anymore. That being said, it doesn't stop the wind from affecting you completely, which is a bit of a shame, but it is what it is. It does make it so if you get caught off guard in a windy area against some mobs, you're not going to get blown off the edge while trying to fight them. And it will also completely negate all of those bugs people are always talking about potentially getting blown off the edge even though you're pushing against the wind. Unsurprisingly, the Delver boots are equipped to your leg slot. Now, the combination of these 2 items has been fantastic for me, and I've had a really good time just wandering around a bit, something that I couldn't do previously because, well, I didn't really know where I was going, and I was always afraid of getting eaten by parasites or blown off the cliff, which I don't have to worry about anymore. I will give one word of advice though, and not that it makes too much of a huge difference considering the parasites can't really get you in the Furfire Caverns anyway, but do not explore the Furfire Caverns. I wish I had explored these more before I made my Layer 2 video because the Furfire Caverns fucking suck. I'm sure they were designed the way they were as yet another noob trap. If you don't know where you're going, then you'll never get out. But yeah, in my experience exploring the Furfire Caverns, I just got lost, barely got any loot, didn't find anything of note, eventually got stuck in a pit with endless respawning bone keepers for a long time. Seriously guys, why do these endlessly respawn? It's bad enough that I'm stuck down here. Either way, it's a waste of time. Don't explore the Furfire Caverns, just go the standard route. The rest of the area, if you haven't explored it fully, go for it. But here, don't do it. Now, for the most part, everything I've said has been positive so far, but there are a few negative things that I can't really see getting patched out, but I'll mention them anyway, just because I can see them being potentially a problem. And those problems definitely stem from the execution of the Delver boots and the Wormwater Lantern. Mostly the fact that they're default equipment items, which means that not only does equipping them mean that whatever you currently had on gets de-equipped, but I presume it also means that if you have it in your inventory and you die, you can potentially drop it. Now, this probably doesn't sound like that big of a problem in face value, but when you start to think about it a little more, well, it does, especially for those playing characters that aren't deep bound. On the profile I was using, I have deep bound, which means I have access to a bank right outside where you go into Layer 2. So for me, no big deal. I'll just put the Wormwater Lantern and the Delver boots into my bank, and anytime I want to go to Layer 2, I'll just take them out of my bank, bada boom, bada bam. But for everyone else, this isn't an option. But regardless, basically what I'm getting at is I almost feel like these equipment should be soul-bound by default. If you're carrying them around with you pretty frequently, if not all the time, just so that you have it available in case you want to go to Layer 2, well, if someone kills you on the surface at any moment, you could just drop them, and then you gotta go make them again. And that's a real pain in the ass. I know it's a nitpick, but I couldn't not mention it, because I picked up on that potential issue basically immediately upon logging in. Other than that though, I'm a huge fan of all of this stuff. It's hard not to be. I think the drawback to the lantern is a pretty cool idea. I didn't really think about decreasing your movement speed, but it works out. Overall, it's nice to be listened to, I think. You guys have to understand that I make hundreds of videos where I talk about problems in games, and obviously I expect for the most part that a lot of that stuff falls on deaf ears because, well, it's not fair to expect everyone to listen to everything I have to say. But on the occasions that it does happen, it feels pretty good. Maybe you guys could finally axe Chime Skulls, since that's the worst mechanic in a video game ever, but, you know,